So a few videos ago in the video about media, I said that I was working on a project about media and then I would say more about it. So here's the video where I'm going to start saying more about it. But first I want to just tie it into the last video I made about value theory. I felt like I needed to get that one off my chest first because I think value theory and value is kind of fundamental to everything, but that includes media and politics. And I think this is underappreciated. I think it's not adequately understood how deeply media is about value. You know, even if you're just blogging about gaming or anime or something, maybe it's less serious, but you're still making value judgments about what to cover, what, specific games or features or directors to cover and how you cover them, what you focus on. You could express the same idea by saying media is inherently political. I would say it's inherently axiological, but it's a similar idea. And just as an example, to kind of give you a flavor of what I'm trying to say, is I'll just contrast two newish media organizations. One of them was called The Messenger. It was, I think, started by some people from the Hill, 2000-ish, and then ended about a year and a half ago. And I never really followed it, but I was reading about it after the fact, and I just got the sense that their kind of statement of values seemed a bit boilerplate. And you can see it on archive.org. And there's nothing really wrong with it, I would say. I suspect it was sincere, and I agree with a lot of what they say. But it's things about objectivity and fairness, but I think media implicitly must have or explicitly must have kind of a richer theory of value than what they have here. So as a contrast to that, we could look at another outlet called the 19th, and their value statement is much more concrete and specific. They're focused on gender and women's issues, transgender issues. It's not just about like fairness and balance. Like there's specific things that they value and that they're trying to advance. So advance human rights, civil rights, racial justice, gender equity. So whether you agree with that or not, or to whatever extent you value those things, it is a value statement. And I think that is appropriate because I think you just are going to have values in your work, and it's better that they be explicit than implicit. And the Messenger, it didn't even really have a kind of statement of principles that meets the bar of kind of more basic threshold. You might not want your media organization to have like the specific focus the 19th has, or even a specific focus on a particular topic. But there's kind of a classic statement of the meaning and purpose of journalism that I think a lot of us would kind of resonate with. In chapter 1, they're basically saying the primary purpose of journalism is to provide citizens, or we could just say the people or readers, with information they need to be free and self-governing. So this speaks to this kind of classic idea of journalism as like a fourth branch of government. And in a later chapter, they talk about how journalism's first loyalty is to citizens. And they mean that in a broad way. This was written a while ago before, immigration became such a hot topic. I think they said in a later interview or something that they didn't mean it that way. So we could just expand that statement to say journalism's first loyalty should be to the people, or to people in general. My point is just to say that media is inherently axiological, and if you just try to avoid it and say, we're just going to be true and fair and objective, it's not really satisfying, and there's probably some implicit value system that you're not admitting to yourself or not admitting to your readers. So with that in mind, I just want to talk about, where are we in the modern age with media, and what's the project I'm working on? So I think the basic dilemma, which I sketched in the previous video as well, is traditional media is vitally important in the sense that traditional journalism has this verification function, this kind of civic function, and we can't lose that. Even if all the newspapers die and all the traditional TV stations die, somehow in this new age we need some way of preserving that function. And I think it is being preserved. You have a lot of journalists going to Substack. You have people doing shows on YouTube. But in this new age, social media kind of controls everything. And I don't want to completely rag on it because I think there are good aspects of social media, but it's not really a substitute for journalism itself. It's kind of value agnostic. Like it basically just values engagement. An engaging post with falsehoods or smears or something like that may actually get boosted more than something more truthful. So I just feel like we're in this awkward stage where, computers are eating the world, interactive digital technology is eating the world, and so social media is eating media, but we haven't quite figured out how to bring forward those traditional values into this new age. And one approach, I think there's a couple ways to try to attack this problem. I would say one of them is fact-checking, another is community notes, and a third would be to try to design digital media from the ground up to be to have more of this kind of traditional journalistic ethic within it. So first, a little bit about fact-checking. Fact-checkers are, I think, doing the Lord's work a lot of the time, but it's not really a complete solution to this dilemma that I'm talking about, because first of all, it's just not efficient, right? Like people can you can make 20 fake accounts, post 1,000 bullshit claims, some of them go viral, and each of those takes maybe a lot of work to rebut or to fact check, and people might not even see the fact check, right? So it feels like trying to kill mosquitoes without solving the problem of where the mosquitoes are coming from. I know a little bit about the space because I worked on a fact-checking platform called Check for an organization called Me Done a few years ago. Actually, basically designed the V3 version of Check. Before that, it was kind of a CMS, and my effort was to make it more of a fact-checking platform. I'm very proud of it. I hope it continues to be useful, but I guess I want, it's also B2B. I think I want something that's maybe a bit more B2C, so maybe more widely participatory, and something that isn't just focused on individual claims, but also vetting sources and probably doing NLP and stuff like that, which maybe they've gotten into, but I think that was years ago. Second problem is it's kind of like patched onto these networks post facto. They weren't really designed for it. There's a famous article about the content moderation curve. I think the story of a lot of social media is like you start out naive, you just want people to exchange cat pictures and sell ads against it, and then you start getting like illegal content, abusive content, genocides being organized. So you start needing some type of human or algorithmic or combination moderation, and often it seems like the moderation is not performed very well, and I don't think that's a diss on the moderators so much as the fact that like the system maybe isn't designed well, or they don't have enough resources. I'm not really sure. And then they made another improvement, which I think is good, but still kind of a patch. They made this kind of Supreme Court Moderation Council, but that group is only going to be able to handle the most high-profile cases. I've been saying for years, I feel like social media should have something more like a court system, and be designed from the ground up to be more epistemological. And I think the third problem is that there are real questions about bias among human fact checkers themselves. So whether that's just kind of traditional journalism or moderators on social media, maybe it's unavoidable, but there does seem to be real concerns about bias or lack of sufficient care being taken in that activity. And I talked about an example of that in the On Media video. And that was a pretty name brand fact-checking organization that did that. It's like who checks the fact checkers? Who fact checks the fact checkers? So fact checking is important, but not a complete solution. Community notes is a more recent innovation that happened at Twitter. I'm a little late understanding it because I don't use Twitter currently. It's actually really good. It's exactly the type of thing I'm talking about, where we want factfulness to be kind of designed into the fabric of these media systems and not just kind of like patched on at the end.
A button that lets them add an asterisk to any misleading post. The user will then be asked to specify why they think the post needs a note, whether it's misleading, inaccurate, outdated, etc. That proposed note appears on the community notes dashboard of other contributors who vote on whether or not it's helpful. And this is actually where it gets interesting. This is not a simple majority system where whichever note gets the most votes wins. A note needs to hit a certain threshold of supporting votes, and those votes need to show a general consensus among contributors who typically disagree with each other. This encourages contributors to stick to the facts and cite reliable sources when writing a note.
I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't think it's a complete solution either. There's still questions around who becomes a rater, who gets to become a reviewer. What happens if the owners of the site think that it's skewed in some direction and they want to alter it rightly or wrongly? You know, what happens when community notes get something wrong? How much does that happen? So, but I think it's actually a great direction, and that's basically the direction that I think media should go in. Is how do we somehow combine these traditional values of journalism with these digital or predominantly digital platforms? The interesting thing about community notes is that it feels a bit timid. Like, it's framed around helpfulness. It doesn't describe itself as doing fact checking. So it, like I talked in the last video about, we should become more comfortable talking about our values. Helpfulness is kind of it's a bit evasive. It's like, what are we really talking about? What are we really doing here? You know, but I think it's a step in the right direction. But anyway, so the combination of those two things I would call collaborative media. So I think community notes, in a sense, we could see that as a successful experiment in collaborative media. But aside from that, I don't think there's a lot that fit that description. So like Google News, Apple News, they're kind of agnostic epistemologically. Substack, same thing. Ground News, they do some helpful things with bias, but I don't know of them taking a stand on like what is or is not misinformation on anything. Wikipedia is interesting because it is an example of a opinionated digital media organization. Like, they do ultimately take positions on what is true and what is false. That's controversial, but it's also, I think it's important. But they don't really cover current events. They kind of just, it's a perennial encyclopedia. I don't know why, but Wiki News has never really taken off. What else? The Flip Side is an interesting new experiment. I bought a membership to that. I haven't used it much, but I may say more about that in the future. Two-Way is an interesting experiment in digital media. It's not an app, but it is a more interactive, kind of more modern way of doing media, which is also journalistic. And there's more projects we could talk about. So I want to keep this video short. I'll say more about the project I'm working on maybe next time. But to me, this is like the basic problem. One of the basic problems we have in the 21st century is that media continues to be important. It's always been important. Journalism is under attack by social media. Social media has not figured out how to bring forward the kind of values of journalism in the modern age. Community Notes is actually a great step in that direction, and I'm interested in experimenting with things that are broadly similar in that regard.